coach. I'm ready to play fantasy. I know I turned 2 in a day, but the lace isn't hot in my veins. I can turn 2 in every way, so I turn to YouTube today and smash play. I'm prepared to listen. The X-Fippin' whip got me looking way past the pitches. Statistics all that I know, and I know that who is on first, he can say I'm ready to go. I ain't trying to steal second or third, cause I wanna win first. How am I to put all of these numbers to words? I know the terms from A to Z, it's like a gift and a curse. I know the difference between a splitter and a curve, but if I can't put it into points, man, then what's it worth? I need the truth, I need knowledge. Found this podcast with all of it, but what they call it? Turn 2. Turn 2, what it do? Win leagues, catch out. Peace.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Turn 2 podcast. I'm your host, Matt Williams. You can find me on Twitter at MATTWI77IMS. And today I'm joined by a very special guest. He needs no introduction, although maybe he does, because you may just know him as the entity of Pitcher List, but his name is actually Nick Pollock, the man behind, the man, the myth, the legend, the guy behind Pitcher List, at Pitcher List on Twitter. Nick, thanks for joining me, the guru. Well, under the guru, there's a lot of starting pitcher guys out there, but you make the list. You put people on the list. So, I mean, you're the SP guy.
What is happening? I thank you for that introduction, but I'm amazed and blown away by that song. Like, that was, sometimes you have songs that like kind of fit or whatever. That was made for you specifically. Yes. And I'm very impressed that they know the difference between a splitter and a curve. And I know that sounds facetious, but it's not, because a lot of people don't know baseball and have no idea what the difference between a splitter and a curve is. And they know, and that means they know business. So that's a good thing. I mean, that was really a dope opening, I gotta say. That was cool.
I like it. I mean, as far as podcast openings go, it's a bit long, but every time people are like, you need to shorten it up, and I listen to it, I'm like, nope, can't do it. Can't shorten it up. It was made for me. I'm playing it. Right. It's here, and I'm taking it with me. It's like that comfy old chair. I like it, and I'm bringing it everywhere with me.
You can't even get it inside the door. You'll take off the door hinge just for that chair, right?
Yeah. We don't need a new chair. We need a new door.
There it is.
French doors. So we're going to be talking all about starting pitching. Spoiler alert, everybody.
Yes.
And we're going to bounce past the obvious names that everyone talks about at the beginning. Not that they're unimportant. They're incredibly important. But you don't really win or lose a league based on the pitchers you take in the beginning. Injuries happen. They can happen to everybody. We're going to talk about the pitchers a little towards the back of the draft. Mainly the ones that like maybe could become a top 100 pick, could become like a top 20, 25 starting pitcher. The people that have the skills. There's reasons certain pitchers are taken at the top, and it's usually because they're very good and they can dominate other pitcher or other hitters. They should be able to dominate other pitchers, but they don't have to do that now, designated hitter. But there's some things that hold people back: injury concerns, limited innings. There's all sorts of reasons, but we're talking mostly from a skill standpoint today. So me and Nick, we're going to go through our process of how we think that you should go about identifying these like discount aces later in drafts, where you can find the value in, if you want to pound hitters early in a fantasy draft and get all those at bats taken care of, where you can go in and what you should look for. So before we kind of get into anything I'm going to say, what do you have anything to kind of tell the audience, and just in general, on how you like to attack pitchers in a draft? Because I kind of know the answer because I follow you, but for anyone who doesn't know, like, how do you, someone who's very strong in analyzing starting pitching, how do you like to go after pitchers in a fantasy draft? Do you like to grab some early studs? Do you just like to wait and rely on your own acumen?
Sure. So I think the phrase that I try to beat down as much as I can is that it's not a best ball league. And a lot of times we treat it like we do, because we draft our team and then you get fantasy pros to say, all right, you are second in the league in pitching and you are fifth in hitting and all that. And all that's doing is taking your entire roster and then going to the season-long projections and comparing it with everybody else. And that's worthless, because anyone that drafts a team in a redraft and a standard 12-teamer knows that half of your team isn't the same at the end of the year. And we have to draft with that mentality. So my best strength, if it wasn't, I'd be a fraud, is finding starting pitching in season. So I personally say, okay, I don't want to deal with hitting then. I want to get all of my hitters that I can get and then lean on finding better pitchers later on in the draft. It doesn't mean I'm not taking a starter for the first 7 rounds. I always want to do that, but I couldn't do that this year. So I'm probably finding myself going for 1 or 2 or so. I try to find myself with.
You guys had
Yeah.
sorry, not to interrupt you, just
Go
piggyback
ahead.
something you just said. There was an article, you didn't write it. It was on Pitcher List though. You promoted it. And the headline was like something along the lines of, you don't have to take a pitcher in the first 15 rounds. And everyone kind of took it as you saying that you were so confident that you were not even taking a pitcher in the first 15 rounds. But
Yeah,
you meant
no.
you don't have to take a pitcher every pitcher in every single one.
Right. No, that was a great Matt Goodwin article. And what he did, it was a really good one. He was just saying, look, like you don't have to take one every 15, every single round, but if you are considering one in each round, this is my favorite one in each round. It's
Yes.
a really good article.
It is.
And
just the way that it got misconstrued.
Yeah.
I thought it was like, wow, they are so confident in pitching. They're telling you, don't even take one of the first 15. We got you covered late.
Not even me would do that. Now, I am so tempted to do one league somewhere where I get my entire offense before I draft a single pitcher and see how much I can rely on that. But in essence, I mean, my thought process this year used to be 4 pitchers in the first like 10 rounds or you want 4 pitchers you could trust through the entire year. Sometimes I can go into like the 12th and get that. This year, I've been seeing pitching get pushed up a lot more than usual, which means the guys in the 20s and 30s that I normally could wait past 100 are going around 80 or so, which means that I'm only getting around 3 of those that I normally would get. But I'm not someone getting 2 starters in the first 4 or 5 rounds. Absolutely not. Maybe one of them. I've been seeing Zach Wheeler in the 3rd and Alcantara in the 4th. And those are guys that I feel can produce at a 2nd round level or higher. And I'm okay with that, considering also the hitting falls off a little. But for the most part, I'm all about finding the fun stuff in the middle, the 50s and the 60s of my ranks and jumping on those and then adapting in season. So all my rankings are about, look, take chances, make mistakes, get messy, Miss Frizzle method, and then adapting in season as you can find so much talent on the wire.
I agree. And this conversation is very different if you have a waiver wire or you don't. If you are in a draft and hold league, you do have to try to find some innings.
Yes.
Making sure you have pitchers that will just pitch is such a big thing. I mean, if you look at a draft board for a draft and hold, you look pitchers very late. You're like, why was he drafted? Because he's going to throw at a certain point. Just having someone that'll literally be with the ability to go out to the mound and throw the ball to the catcher is immense. But for the most part, most people are in a waiver league. So that's how we're going to kind of string along this conversation. I do my weekly column by the numbers. This week, I kind of dug in on this because I knew we were going to be talking about it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll do some research here. We can use it on the show. I just went through some basic stat parameters. This doesn't have to do with scouting or mechanics. This is purely numbers, as if I didn't watch a game. I just went through the things that I believe should be kind of the most important things I would look for a pitcher for what they did last year and what they're going for. And it basically came down to mostly plate discipline things. If anyone listens to the show, these, but I'll go over them in case there's a new listener. O-swing, which is basically like a chase rate. It's a percentage of pitches that a pitcher generates outside of the strike zone swings. And, for batters, you want this to be low. For pitchers, you want this to be high. So what I did was went through and just found anyone who just had a league average rate that was higher than the league average. The league average was 31.3%. I went through everyone who qualified at a certain threshold, and boom, anyone who was at or above that stayed on the list. Then I went to Z contact. For anyone, that's just the contact that the pitcher generates inside of the zone. For a hitter, you want this to be very high. You want to make high contact in the zone. For pitcher, you obviously want this to be lower. The league average was 84.6%. Added that to the threshold also, and then further limited down the list. Anyone with an 84.6 or lower could stick around. Anyone else get lost. And then I went to swinging strike rate, which ties in pretty well with Z contact, which in terms of your swinging strike is usually is a pitcher swinging out within the strike zone. But the league average was 11.2. Why not? We added it to the list. And then the last thing was I just limited it to K minus walk percentage. The league average for there is usually a little tick above 14%, but for our purposes, I limited it to 16% or higher because it kind of filters out just pretty much a lot of pitchers. So
Yeah, we do that. Like we have league averages on the site now for our
so
tables.
good, by
And
the way.
I know
So
it
good.
changes everything. And what we did to calculate that is we took the top 200 starting pitchers in batters faced, because for fantasy purposes, a guy who throws 5 innings or comes up for 3 starts that is not actually relevant in any way should not be weighted the same way as, say, Scherzer or something along those lines. And we also felt like we couldn't just do it with a grouping of innings either. So the league average is a little bit higher for a lot of these stats based on the higher ability, because it is taking the top 200 batters faced as opposed to everybody. So yeah, I think that was the right thing to do, to say 14% is truly the league average, but for our purposes, it's closer to 16% or so.
By the way, I love that you added league averages. It's so important for everything, especially when there's so much data out there. I just had
insane.
on, I just did an entire show about analytics with Ron Chandler. We both agreed that like there's so much information out there. And the most important thing that I think we can do is give context to everything we do. And league average is one of the best contexts you can possibly give. So
yeah, I'm learning. I'm learning on my own site. I'm like, oh, cool, we have this then. Now I understand what a good strike rate is for a slider. I didn't actually really know before. I had a guess, but I didn't really know. Now
hey, if you explain a stat, give a number and try to explain it to someone, you can spend 5 minutes trying to explain it. But instead, if you gave them just the stat, the league average, and then like what a good pitcher does with it, 3 numbers, they'll understand it better than they ever could have with you explaining it.
Absolutely.
So doing all those metrics again with the O swing, which is essentially a chase rate, in zone contact, and swing and strike rate, K minus walk. That just spit out everyone who met all those criteria. It spit out 37 names, which is not a lot. But it was still, a decent amount. I'm not going to name all 37 here. But most of it are names you're very familiar with. I think I even noted that 24 of the 37 were top 150 picks. There's a few guys that sneak in here. Perennial underachiever Andrew Heaney always pops up on these lists, no matter what.
Heaney.
It's on the list. Bounce back candidate Chris Paddock. Metrically performed not too poorly last year in terms of these metrics. And then Jose Urquidy on the Astros. I point these 3 out because we're not going over 37 names. I'm about to narrow it down even further, but these 3 were on the list and are now not about to be. But do you have any thoughts here, Nick? Because Andrew Heaney is always a name. I always was on the hill with him. And now that he's in like a great spot, theoretically, I'm kind of like completely, it's just finally one straw too many. I'm just off of it. But Heaney, he's literally on these lists every single year if you try to break down elite stat parameters.
It's pretty funny that you're saying, oh, he's on the list, yet he's not on my list. I put out my top 100 again on Monday.
That's why I said this is a blind list.
Right. Absolutely.
There's important reasons why he's not on this list.
Yeah, exactly. So Andrew Heaney, he's just not somebody that I think we can trust for multiple reasons. One, how are the Dodgers going to use him in the first place? Do you actually see a scenario where the Dodgers say, yeah, you know what? Here you go. Here's 6 innings, Andrew Heaney. Absolutely not. I think he's going to be limited to 4 innings or so when he does start. He might get even opened for. He could be long relief a lot because it's just too risky with him. The man allows a ton of home runs. His command is all over the place. And I think what this does well is showcase, when things work out in his favor, they can be really good, right? It showcases the ceiling a lot when you take a lot of these numbers. But what it doesn't show, which is the part that's hardest to quantify really, is, hard contact rates. What happens, where does he locate these pitches? How badly is he hit? What is the damage like? And Andrew Heaney, we all know, is just home run machine. And unless something dramatically changes, either he finds the command of that changeup and curveball to really keep guys more off balance and off of that sinker, or maybe there's something new that he adds, or maybe there's new velocity, or just something to really suggest otherwise, there's no reason for me to go after Andrew Heaney.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. A lot of people love to, again, it's a wasted exercise, but who's this year's Robbie Ray? And everyone wants to know Andrew Heaney. Robbie Ray was never injury prone. In fact, besides the Cy Young year, he actually kind of proven he could do this before in a full season. He pretty much did it before. So yeah, it's definitely not an apples to apples situation.
No. If you want the real Robbie Ray, and honestly that fits it the most to me, was Patrick Corbin. Because it was someone who had been good before, then just completely lost it, but will get like the full innings, all that kind of stuff. But the problem with him is not the same one as Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray's fix was, oh, my stuff is so good, I'm just going to throw it in the zone now. He was a nibbler with his fastball, and now you just see the glove in the middle of the plate, and he just naturally goes to the upper third with fastballs, and it's really good, and that's that. Patrick Corbin, his fault, actually, he needs to throw fewer strikes with his fastball, at least less in the zone, as I should say, while still trying to figure out how to get the same amount of strikes overall. It's a weird thing. You can actually see the zone rates on his fastball go up to like 55% in these past 2 years, 55, maybe I think 57. When he was really good in 2018, 2019, it was sub 50%, which is so strange. You don't see that often, but I think it's essentially the balance and the flow of an at-bat is more important for Patrick Corbin to keep guys cheating on heaters all the time.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens, because he had higher velocity. Like, maybe he can throw it off the plate and have higher O swing. I don't know. I'm not going to draft Patrick Corbin. I'm just so curious how that fastball looks when the season starts.
Like next year, Robbie Ray. Patrick Corbin. Are you drafting him? No.
Well, you shouldn't have drafted Robbie Ray last year, honestly. Yeah. I mean, until we saw it change.
I did draft Robbie Ray, but I'm not going to take credit for thinking this was going to happen. I thought, all right, he's going to strike out people.
Sure.
I took him believing that. But yeah, it was all gravy after that as well. It's funny you mentioned hard contact for Andrew Heaney. The reason he's being lopped off immediately to our next list is because of hard contact. But just because we mentioned him, Chris Paddock, he's interesting. The sheriff, he finally, I was excited pre-season last year because there was all this stuff where he was against analytics completely. He was against like the drive line. He was against like improving through technology, and he embraced that. And I thought, maybe we got something here. And of course that didn't really occur, but again, he does show up on this list as someone who does get people to chase. He does, limits hard contact, or at least limits overall contact in the zone. So there is something here. And, the Padres are going to, could certainly use him with some of the issues that they have. So any interest in Chris Paddock?
So it's funny that you talked about hard contact. So we have a stat on the site, which is hard contact percentage. It's all batted balls above 95 miles per hour, and it's over plate appearance, which isn't the hard contact on Savant. Hard hit percentage, that's over batted ball. We found that plate appearances is just a better way of gauging this. It makes a lot more sense too. So the hard contact rate that you want to see, like Freddie Peralta is number one among starters. That's at 17%. Okay. And generally around 23, 24 is what's normal for a starter, like about average or so. Chris Paddock's last year was 31% overall on hard contact rate. So 31% of all plate appearances Chris Paddock had a batted ball event of 95 miles per hour or harder exit velocity. That's terrible. That ranked 174th among all starters. And the thing for Chris Paddock is, what is going to change now? He has to get his fastball back. There's a lot of talk about the spin axis and the spin efficiency of it. I obviously have no idea if it changed now in the spring. I'm not thinking that it did. There was also talk after 2019 that he needed a third pitch, and Paddock has been searching for that curveball for a while. I don't think that we saw anything.
After the last offseason of spring training, he was supposed to bring that in the last year, and then like opening day came, he's like,
he threw it 12% of the time for a 50% strike rate. You want to see, especially on a curveball, something like a 60%. The league average is 58%, but you want that to be a definitive strike getting offering. It wasn't. So Paddock, to me, is the sixth man for the Padres. Nick Martinez, I think, has a streamlined spot ready for him in San Diego. They signed him for this. They know that he's going to be capable of it. I have no interest going after Chris Paddock here. I mean, sure, monitor to see how well the fastball performs and what opportunities he has, but he's a prime example of somebody you're not drafting on draft day. You are going to be watching in April, see how everything goes, monitoring his opportunities, see if anything has changed. And then if he does get that chance as the number 5 and things are looking good, that's when you start paying attention and maybe consider him for your teams.
Well said. Because this original list was only plate discipline metrics, didn't look into batted ball events, which are a huge deal. We're going to enter that in now. The list goes from 37 down to 24 when we just add in one more thing. any pitchers that allow a barrel rate of 8% or less. If you have above that, we do not want you. And obviously that is Heaney's problem. That is Paddock's problem. And Jose Urquidy couldn't quite get there either. So this brings down the list too. So now, anyway, what you remain is someone who gets chases out of the zone, limits contact within the zone, gets whiffs, has a night, doesn't walk many people compared to the amount that he strikes out, and limits hard contact. That's what's left.
This is so painful, Matt.
What?
I'm seeing Kenta Maeda there. And I miss him so much. He could come back by the end of the year. I understand. I just miss him. That's all. Domenico Hernandez is a very interesting one there. He's not going to get the opportunity.
I could put it on the screen for everyone listening, but for everyone watching. But obviously, for everyone that is listening to the show, you will not be able to see this, so I will go over it. 24 names are left here. If I can open this up.
The Domenico Hernandez obviously is out of the rotation currently. He did have a setback, I believe it was a shoulder thing, where he's not even ready to go to be that number 5. And I do believe the Yankees were going to lean on Nestor Cortez Jr. anyway, for that first opportunity, which might not even be the first turn of the rotation. They do have that day off. So we'll see how that goes. But Domenico Hernandez is someone, if he, like Paddock, if he gets the chances, I would be looking at it. Hernandez throws a fastball, changeup, and curveball. Curveball has been very good in the past to help him out. It could be good. It's just not something you want to draft right away. I'd say the most interesting name that I've been giving a lot of thought to, and maybe you can guess before I say it here, is Alex Cobb. I'm sorry.
We know Cobb's here. I tried sharing this to the screen, and it is way too freaking small. So it's only 24 names. 18 of the 24 are being drafted in the top 50, which only left 6 outliers. I'm going to name the 24 real quick, just so the audience can know what they are. Great. We're only going to focus on the outliers for the rest of the show. Max Scherzer, Sean Manaea, Domingo Germán, we already brought up, Pablo Lopez, Jordan Montgomery, we'll talk about him, Luis Garcia, Aaron Nola, Kevin Gausman, Clayton Kershaw, Eduardo Rodriguez barely squeaks into the top 150, but we know a lot about him. We don't have to talk about him much. Lucas Giolito, Jacob deGrom, Carlos Rodon, Nathan Eovaldi, Kenta Maeda, who's obviously out injured, sadly, Sandy Alcantara, Patrick Sandoval, we'll talk about him, Brandon Woodruff, Lance Lynn, Alex Wood, Trevor Rogers, Zach Wheeler, Alex Cobb, who Nick just alluded to, and Corbin Burns. So those names we're going to be talking about right now who sneak into this basically list of like proven aces. Let's talk about Alex Cobb, Alex Wood, Patrick Sandoval, Jordan Montgomery, because I think those are definitely the names that stick out. That it's if anyone's really into fantasy baseball, they're names that aren't a surprise to you, but it may be a surprise that they show up on a list like this because they're only surrounded by like just all-stars.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Alex Cobb's very interesting to me for multiple reasons. He went away from a 4-seamer that I think Savant was kind of listing wrong to a sinker that limited hard contact super, super well. 22% for a sinker is incredible, considering that the league average sinker is a 32%. That's dramatically better. And you have that going 40+% of the time now with Brandon Crawford in San Francisco. He's already done a really good job of limiting home runs, and that only gets better with the giant brick wall TM in San Francisco now. That's a really nice situation. Then you have the thing, which is Alex Cobb's splitter, constantly above a 20% swing strike rate. So you have a strikeout pitch. And then like Dylan Bundy, Patrick Sandoval, even there is this show me curveball that Alex Cobb gets a ton of called strikes with, a 25% last year. Helped him get a 36% CSW on it and a 62% strike rate. It does get hit hard, and I do wonder if its 16% usage is a little too high because guys are ready for it a little bit early in counts, as he's very extreme throwing it early. It's 85% of all curveballs that Cobb throws are early in counts. So it might be something that you want to might want to tweak a little bit moving forward. Still, it's a really nice repertoire that could fit really well in San Francisco. And I'm thinking about April a lot because a lot of pitchers are going to be depressed in their pitch usage. It does mean a guy like Michael Kopech, who we're not really expecting to see, unleashed until May, is actually kind of better because overall pitching is worse in April. But it also means guys like Alex Cobb, who could be just fine from opening day, go up even more in value. So I'm finding myself targeting Alex Cobb a little bit at the end of drafts as someone to consider for that opening week or two. And if it doesn't quite work out, it doesn't quite work out. But it's not that huge of a risk. And, if I don't want to hold on to him after that, that's fine. I need to have a couple empty roster spots anyway. So I'm really intrigued on this. And I think y'all should be considering Alex Cobb.
I love Cobb. I love the move to San Francisco. We know that it pretty much saved him going to Anaheim. He had a huge problem giving up homers, like golf balls, constantly.
Oh, yeah.
Not the best place for it. His sinker, I mean, there wasn't like a big difference in terms of like, I could find, maybe you can enlighten us as far as like the way his grip. I couldn't find a massive difference in release point. It looked like it was a little bit lower, but his both his sinker and his splitter seemed to gain about an inch of both vertical and horizontal movement. And it certainly showed up. I mean, strikeout percentage went up from 11.3 to 26.1 on the sinker, 7.8 point gain in chase rate, splitter. And you said the curveball, he kind of like moved away from it being one of those like sliding curveballs where it had a little bit of horizontal movement. It turned into more of a, I don't want to say 12-6, but more of like what most people would consider a curveball, kind of straight over. And he uses them both to get not just ground balls, but like, and swings and misses and ground balls. So yeah, it was fantastic. The curveball jumped from a 10% to a 31.3% in the chases outside of the zone, which is what you want. You want it to look like it's going to be a strike and then not be. Did you know anything with Cobb as far as anything he did mechanically different? Because the pitchers were just better. But as far as spin, I don't see anything different. As far as grip, I didn't notice anything different.
Yeah.
Slight adjustment in release point. It's like,
yeah, nothing huge on my end. I would say on the going from a four-seamer to sinker, I think Savant's just doing that because he did get an extra 2 inches of drop, as you were alluding to. I don't know. I think it's always been a sinker. Honestly, I've been calling it one for years. I was really shocked to see that we classified it differently before 2021. But yeah, Cobb's sinker is doing good things, and it's going to do good things again, likely in San Francisco in a better environment to do so. It's all looking nice for Alex Cobb as long as he can continue to, keep the ball on the ground and prevent those long balls.
Let's talk about one of your Yankees real quick. Patrick.
Oh, my Yankees. Oh, no, don't do this. Montgomery. Don't pin me as a full Yankee fan. Everyone knows I'm a pitching fan first. All right.
Yes.
Just so we're clear.
Well, Jordan Montgomery is a good pitcher. Most people think he struggled mightily in 2020. It was pretty much a BABIP thing. If you look, I even included a chart in my article. The ERA and BABIP pretty much tail each other from year to year. He metrically, he was just as good in 2020 as he was last year. Both his FIP, XFIP were kind of like tailed. His off-speed stuff is great. His breaking ball and his changeup are good. His fastballs are just, I don't want to say terrible, maybe terrible.
They're terrible.
But like he keeps moving, like he like abandoned the sinker at points and went up in the four seam, and he kind of had tinkered with it throughout the entire year. He was at 10% to start in April with his four seam. He ended the year about 25%. Sinker, he started at 22%ish. He ended the year around 15. He looks like he's constantly trying to figure out how to work in his fastballs into his arsenal, where maybe he needs to go like full Sonny Gray and just kind of abandon him a little bit altogether. What are your take on we've seen what he can do. What's it going to take for him to make that next step? Because the fastball or lack of plan to use them properly in his arsenal, it seems to be holding him back.
Yeah. So we have this fun thing where we have like these ranks for everybody, but we also have it for individual pitches too. So just looking right now, like as his sinker and four seamer, it's all blue, which is not good. And that's like middle of the pack, like 90s or so, which for a starting pitcher is not what you want to see for classifications on your fastball and your sliders or in your sinker. And this is what I see. I see a Cleveland Guardians pitcher in disguise, where you have a changeup and a curveball that are amazing. Like these are really, really excellent offerings. But he only throws them just under 50% of the time. And he's trying to find his strikes elsewhere with sinkers, four seamers, and cutters. And even that cutter was bad too.
Yes.
And the four seamer only had a 58% strike rate with just an 8% swing strike rate. And the reason why I'm saying it like that is if you're throwing a fastball a good amount, you're either trying to do two things. One, sneak it in the zone to get strikes, which he's not doing. Or B, saving it as a strikeout offering by elevating fastballs and getting swings and misses, which he's not doing. So it's bad. It's really, really bad. What I think could be a solution for Jordan Montgomery is depressing fastball usage overall. And I think he tried to do that with that cutter. It's just not a good pitch. But throw more changeups and curveballs. Throw them in the zone.
They're so good.
Generally, a slider is easier to throw for strikes in the zone. Outside of early curveballs, it's kind of harder to have like a consistent zone pitch for a changeup, for example. And curveballs generally like to live underneath them. But even so, changeups and curveballs inside the zone could really work for him. And finding something, maybe it's the sinker that he just leans on to try and steal the edges. It makes me overall hesitant, though, in Jordan Montgomery. We've seen whips around 130 for him. I don't think this is a season where we see a sub 120 whip for Jordan Montgomery because something really does need to get fixed here. And
Yes.
I don't like relying at this point in the season on something that definitively needs to get fixed without any sign of that changing, especially with Jordan Montgomery, who's not, this isn't his first season. We've seen him for a good amount of time, and we've realized that he is somewhat consistent at what he does. So I'm a little bit out, but hopefully the fastballs do get better.
The one thing that does keep me somewhat in on Montgomery that I like to see, because you look at pitchers and we love to break down guys, and then you'll be like, if he'll only do this, he'll be good. Like Blake Snell, if if you'd only get rid of his changeup.
Oh, get rid of that changeup.
Yeah,
he's taking it out of timeout again. I'm like, no, leave it there.
But like you're hoping for it, and there's nothing definitive. Jordan Montgomery has, especially last year with the tinkering, he looks like he is open and willing to try to find something with that fastball that works. So at least that does give me a little confidence that, all right, this guy knows the problem. He was even quoted this offseason saying, I have a problem with my fastball. Good. I mean, I'm shocked at how many pitchers, they know, but how many just aren't honest about it. All right, this sucks. I need to change it. So at least there is that. But yeah, going back to his changeup, he throws it in the zone over 50% of the time, everybody. And it gets less than 67. It gets 67% contact within the zone. That's awesome. And the curveball generates 41.2% O swing and held hitters to a 77.2 in zone contact, which is still great. But yeah, overall, his fastballs are weird. I mean, his cutter sinks more than his sinker. His four-seamer cuts more than his cutter. And the sinker barely moves at all. So I don't even know what it is.
They're not good. I will say Alex Chamberlain really opened my eyes a bit with VAA. If you don't know that, that's vertical approach angle. Essentially saying where your arm is on release. Is it super high up? Is it on the side or whatever? Affects how the plane of which batters are swinging. So think of you're swinging as a bat. You have a slight uppercut. And if that is matching the same plane of the delivery of the ball from the mound, it's easier to hit. There's just more time that the plane of the bat is going to possibly hit the ball. Yep. So with a really high one, you actually don't want to throw the ball up. You actually want to throw it down. And if you have a really low arm angle, you want to throw the ball up. So Jordan Montgomery has a super high release, and I'm seeing a decent amount of approach where he is going high lock, a decent amount. That's high location percentage. So his high lock on four seamers was 70%, which is really high. And I only see a 40% on sinkers. I do wonder if Jordan Montgomery can live the Kershaw method, that is down and in to right-handers. And I was always taught you don't do that. You don't throw down and in to the opposite handedness. That's the danger zone. But Kershaw, think of him right now, super high release point. That's why he gets that big curveball on it. And I wonder if the solution for Jordan Montgomery is going down and into right-handers, actually focusing more on that low lock, above 40% that we're seeing with the sinkers right now. Get rid of that cutter, get rid of that four-seamer, just those sinkers down and in, and then rely on the changeup and curveball to match that as well.
That's an interesting segue into our next pitcher, because Patrick Sandoval, everyone already kind of knows about him. He's always had a high swinging strike rate over the last couple of years. Since 2019, he's been well above the MLB average in swinging strike rate. And then last year he had that big game against the Twins on the 24th. He struck out 13 over 8 2/3 innings. Metrically, strikeout rate, he looked pretty similar to 2020. So what changed in 2021? That's what we want to know. And it pretty much came down to location and arsenal adjustment. He threw his four seamer way less. He threw his changeup more, but he did start throwing that sinker to left-handers. And I actually have a video of it in the article on how he kind of throws that in to lefties, and actually has helped him be it's been a weapon for him last season. Nothing like as far as nothing as far as something dominant, but he had a 16.5% whiff rate in the zone, which was the 6th best mark in baseball. So he kind of turned this sinker into a nice little weapon versus left-handers, which is kind of what you were just talking about with Montgomery. But we're
Yeah.
hoping to do.
Yeah. Sandoval, man, I love him and I hate him at the same time. I mean, obviously, I have a shirt that's 32 whiffs, and that's after the 6 innings. You need 6 innings, get 32 whiffs, which is insane to me. But that's it against the Mariners. It's incredible. Only Garrett Cole matched 32 whiffs in a single start the entire year. How dare
If he
he
would
take
have
that away?
qualified, if Sandoval qualified, he would have been 6th highest in the league in swinging strike percentage among
Yeah.
pitchers.
Yeah, it's insane. So Patrick Sandoval is fantastic, has that ability because that changeup earned 17 whiffs alone against the Mariners that night. The question really for me is, how is the four-seamer command going to be? He didn't really reduce the overall fastball usage. He just pulled back on four-seamers to throw more sinkers instead, which was not exceptional. I mean, neither of these two pitches are.
No.
And if he's able to get enough strikes with these and not get destroyed, the changeup, slider, curveball are all great. The curveball was an 11% usage last year, and keep in mind this is under 90 innings for Patrick Sandoval.
Yeah.
But its called strike rate was 36%, which is stupid good. A 41% CSW would be like one of the best pitches in baseball. Meanwhile, Sandoval's changeup had the highest swing strike rate of any singular pitch in baseball, 29%. When he threw them 3 out of 10 times, Sandoval earned a swing and a miss, which is crazy. Then you have a slider that is just a really good strike getting pitch, 66% strike rate. Good amount of swing strikes, good amount in the zone, got called strikes, limited hard contact, under 20% of it. It's a really good secondary approach. It's just a question of those fastballs. And of course, that he's an angel, which means that injuries are always going to be a thing. I really hate making that joke for all Angels fans, but that was the deal with Sandoval last year. He had the back injury.
I don't know what you're talking about. As a Mets fan, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. And Sandoval does say he's 100% healthy now, but there is that question mark. All of that said, I think the ability of those secondaries is good enough that the fastball, the four-seamer and sinker, those are the warts, but they're not nearly as significant, I think, as Jordan Montgomery's. I also think the changeup, slider, curveball approach from Sandoval is better than Montgomery's too. And what you're going to see is a guy that, yes, he'll have some bad nights where he doesn't get enough out of his secondaries or his fastballs really burn him. But overall, you're going to see a very exciting pitcher through the year. He's going to get a lot of strikeouts. The quality of inning, I think, is going to be worth your time. I just hope you get 150 innings out of it.
Yeah, that's the one thing. He has never pitched a full year yet. That is probably the biggest knock that is holding him back, because he's a sleeper. We've seen the potential, but he still hasn't really skyrocketed in ADP, and that's mostly the reason. The thing here is, like, I love that he made the changeup his number one pitch. It's still pretty tight to the rest of his arsenal, but it's like a simple concept that some pitchers don't do. If you have a great pitch, throw it more. Pavel, great changeup. He threw him more. Throw him more. It's a good pitch. I mean, it's crazy. He had like a 38.1% zone rate, still had like a nearly 30% swinging strike rate. Why throw it in the zone if people are happy and willing to?
It's so great. 45% chase rate. You ever read that O swing? That's so good. And they just always miss. His command of that changeup is absurdly good. Alex Fast, my co-host on the Corner podcast, put out this amazing GIF of fastball changeup overlay. Maybe he didn't put it out. Maybe he just made it for me, just to showcase stuff with Patrick Sandoval. But it's like perfectly tunneled, and it's incredibly deceptive at a huge drop in velocity too. It's about 9 to 10 velocity gap, which is so good as well. Oh, I could talk about the Irish Panda all day.
The last guy I want to bring up for at least mine, we'll talk about a couple others, is Alex Wood. Now, re-signs with the Giants. I can't wrap my head around a projection for him, because I like everything. He's lowered his release point pretty significantly over the years, to where that has really allowed his off-speed stuff to shine. I mean, you watch him pitch, he coming in at kind of this weird, like, he's got the loose uniform and his arms coming in at this weird 3/4 thing at the very end. And it's very cool. The thing that confuses me is how many 2017, he was great. Last year was maybe his second best season. so much of it was due to called strikes. And I did a article on this last year, and I know there's so many variables outside of the pitcher's control. You need a catcher who can handle and at least framework adequately. You need a somewhat friendly umpire. You need a willing batter to maybe give you a little help. So for just I wanted to get your take on this too, because there's obviously a lot to talk about just Wood's arsenal and how he gets it done and earns the right to be good. But what do you do when you have this pitcher who had this kind of, I don't know, second breakout, and he had so much of his success tied into called strikes? How do you deal with those as a skill and as a repeatable skill? Because that's what you need if you're counting on Alex Wood this year. You kind of need those called strikes to be there.
Absolutely. Yeah. The sinker was thrown about 50% of the time. All of a sudden had that 27% called strike rate. It was 20% in previous years or so. And we saw something actually similar with Adam Wainwright in his sinker.
Yes.
But we've seen also from Adam Wainwright, also like Zach Gallen comes to mind, of having these fastballs with 25% called strike rates that are sticky in some way. And generally that does lean on command. If you're able to spot your fastballs in the right, in the right part of the play or right part of the zone constantly, you'll see guys that are just passive early in counts. And Wood had that skill last year. I think the bigger question is if Wood is going to keep the velocity jump that he had to 92 miles per hour instead of sitting at 90 or so, 90, 91. And hopefully that slider is just as good. I mean, we saw it in 2020 as a knuckle curve, apparently, but it was really retinkered into that slider. And it was an effective offering, but it took another leap last year to jump to about a 70% strike rate with a 37% CSW. Insanely good 22% swing strike rate along the way.
And he threw it less
so
than
good.
half the time in the zone. It was like almost an automatic strike whenever he threw it, and he barely threw it in the zone.
Yeah, it was a really effective offering. 44% zone rate, though, I will say on a slider is above average. Normally it's about 42%. O swing from 34% league average on a starting pitcher slider, 44%. I mean, exactly what you're saying. So many strikes on it. And if you have those two things working, he should be fine. It's not the old changeup that we saw with the Dodgers when he made his All-Star game appearance. It's not that pitch anymore. I was hoping maybe we'd see it, but no, everything dropped on it this past year. There were moments when Alex would have that changeup, but not so much through the year. But without it, it's fine.
It kind of went reverse slider. The way his slider jumped up from its peak, the changeup decreased.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. But I will say this is a great example of somebody you should be monitoring in spring training. If you see that Wood is not hitting, but sitting 92, or at least just like above 91, if you see like sitting 91, 92, great. That would make me feel a lot more confident about Alex Wood, because there is a situation here where he's a ground ball guy with Brandon Crawford, good infield defense, and the giant brick wall that will help Alex Wood in San Francisco, also a winning team, right? Yeah. So it's a good scenario. Once again, just like Patrick Sandoval, is the health going to be there? He only threw about 140 innings last year. That was COVID related, not as much of actual body injury, but still, he has not had the stamina for a full year in a very long time. I don't think any of us really anticipate him to have that this season. And he doesn't have the same strikeout upside that Patrick Sandoval does. I'm still intrigued. I think this is definitely someone that I'd be comfortable starting early, which means that he should certainly be on your radar, especially if you have someone like Shane Baz or something, or even a Michael Kopech, that you need those innings in April, and Wood can give you some good ones.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing with Wood is, I mean, I'm looking at this nice video of him throwing that slider to Brian Reynolds, making a really good hitter look bad. I think that has a lot to do with how much better some people, when you're digging into a pitcher and you're trying to find something, it's not necessarily, he added this one good pitch, now he has another good pitch. It's how it can make the other one so much better. We talked about the called strikes with the sinker. If you're going to have this slider coming in and then drop out of the zone, and then all of a sudden the very next pitch, he throws a sinker in a similar area that does not leave the zone and just comes in a little faster. I mean, it's going to help you get those called strikes. It isn't necessarily even those variables out of his control. It makes sense why they would go up as well, the way he's trying to attack hitters. So it's something to consider, just not with Wood, but just any pitcher. If he makes an arsenal adjustment, it's just kind of good to, all right, what is he trying to do with the other hitter? And how does this pitch being better help the rest of the arsenal? Maybe even, in some cases, make a weak pitch usable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's always a compounding gain when a pitch improves, right? It masks the other bad pitches if now they need to think about this other one more often.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes a huge, huge difference.
So that was just going through that big thing I did with just narrowing down pure analytics. What are some things that you look for later in drafts? Is as far as like the previous year, you haven't gotten really a chance to. There's plenty of things we want to look at spring training as far as velocity. Health is its
Yeah.
own animal, but yeah, what do you look for when you're trying to tag some guys late? That they looked at the from last year to this year that you think, all right, this guy's going to make a next jump. What are some things you think the audience should
Oh
write down?
man.
Take a look at?
So there's no like cookie cutter answer for
Mm,
this because if there were, then everybody would do it and no one would actually be a sleeper, all that kind of fun stuff. So there's multiple things. One is opportunity. Just that's the first most important thing. If a guy doesn't get his chance to actually do something, then what's the point?
Tyler
I
McGill.
will.
I'm a Mets
Yeah.
fan, and everyone's so excited, and I want to be. I'm like,
Well, that's because Taiwan Walker. We don't know if he's actually going to be there
oh
opening
yeah,
day
oh
or
no, well,
not.
yeah, that was, but like the all off season before Walker
Oh
came in
yeah,
with whatever the
yeah,
knee
yeah.
thing was. I'm like, I know the Mets. There's going to be an opening, but for like where he's being drafted, I'm like, I hate drafting people where you're required to have multiple injuries to get an opportunity. So like, I couldn't even be on the bandwagon, even though I wanted to be. And he'll be in the rotation now,
Well,
but it's just like it's just tough.
it's
You're just-
funny you mentioned him. Okay, very quickly on Tyler McGill. What's
yeah,
interesting is let's say Taiwan Walker's out for 3 weeks or something. I don't know. It could even be opening day. Someone in Twitch
yeah.
chat was saying that he might actually be there, and if that's the case. And sorry, Tyler, or you're not there. But let's say it's 3 weeks. Who's to say that in 3 weeks after there isn't another Mets injury that keeps Tyler in there,
Oh, for
right?
sure. And not to mention, I think McGill could easily just like pitch well
Right.
enough
Yeah.
where
So,
they're
but I
like,
don't
"Hey,
know.
Walker,
Yeah.
you need a few extra weeks on the DL. Heal
Yeah,
that
we're
knee
gonna
up."
slow down Carlos Carrasco or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows? So there's that to keep in mind, but yeah, it might be really, really frustrating. I will say it's a nice problem to have of someone with that ability if he's doing well enough. And Tyler is throwing harder all of a sudden. We're talking
Yeah.
like 2 ticks harder. That's
Like his
really good.
changeup, man. He
The
worked on it last year, introduced it, kept getting better and better.
And the biggest thing when it comes to velocity, Rudy Gamble put out a fantastic question, being like velocity vulnerability index, and my former colleague Cameron Grove, pitching bot, put out a really good thing showcasing the plateaus and all that stuff, what matters, and really it's confirming of this idea that we've had for a while of Eno really taught it to me was 91 to 94 mile per hour velocity doesn't really change that much overall on the big scope. There's certain guys like I'm talking about with Alex Wood that there is a difference. But when you want to say for the most part, like where the change happens, it's going from 94 and above. That's when we start seeing true impact of velocity gains. So Tyler McGill going from 94 to 96 is a huge, huge deal. I will say his slider and changeup are questionable. When he showed up last year, the first couple starts, I got excited because I thought the changeup was actually really, really good. And then it fell off and it was really frustrating. The slider can be good enough at times, but it is not the dependable stuff. Now, if Tyler McGill is consistently sitting 96, he could turn into a potential. I think that the ceiling comp is a Brandon Woodruff, where you have a good fastball at 96, and then you have a slider and a changeup that aren't elite, but they're above average. They're complementary. They're good enough that batters need to think about those pitches, that they can't just go chasing fastballs, and he can get strikes with those. I don't know if Tyler McGill can do that now, and it might take some time to do that. But if he sustains this velocity, I will be thinking about McGill a ton. So
And
I'm
the people
curious.
forget, he started A-ball last year. He kind of came out of nowhere, came up out of necessity because there was so many
Yeah.
injuries, and he looked great at times. He ran out of gas. He would have some great starts, and then just like boom, after the second time through, he was done. Ended the year on a pretty solid note. But yeah, it's a work in progress. It'll be a big year for him. Could go either way, but yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see these guys come out of nowhere is always cool.
Right. So, okay. So opportunity was the first thing. Got to have these chances.
Oh, hold on. One
So,
thing of
yeah,
velocity, I just want to mention. Where are you on Yusei Kikuchi? Because I know Rob Silver had put out something very similar to what you're just saying about the velocity.
96 with
Yeah,
Kikuchi,
96
right?
up. He
Yeah.
was Cy Young, 95 below, minor leagues.
Yeah. So he wasn't there yesterday when Kikuchi appeared. And Yeah, I think that Kikuchi is never going to sit somewhere. And I think that even if we see a start at 96, like the next start, it could be 94. That's what I had to deal with last year during the roundup. I'd be get excited, like, oh man, Kikuchi did the thing. Good luck trying to figure out when it is. But there's another half of it.
Is this like an inconsistency in rest, an inconsistency in mechanics? Like, what is this?
This is a thing of just, do you feel good or not on a day? This is, this. I mean, you go through life. There's some days you just kind of wake up and you're like, all right, man, this is the day.
No, I agree with that.
It's like that with pitching too.
I've seen some things on some pitchers, and I'm wondering why I haven't seen this yet. I realize that routine is everything to some starting pitchers. If they're not on it, they are wrecked. Some don't need it as much. Some would rather have the extra rest, and a pitcher like Kikuchi has actually done well with extra rest. I'm wondering why we have not seen a team try to put in some kind of hybrid 6-man rotation. When I say that, I mean not 6-man, but keep certain guys on 5.
Right. No, I was suggesting this with the Yankees last year. But I'm all for this stuff. And I think I was actually talking about it for the man that I never want to talk about again, but it was the Dodgers, and they made this big signing last year. And the idea that they could keep that man on a shorter rest, but then everybody else, the other 5 on a different one too. But with Kikuchi, actually was a 6-man with Seattle for a bit. And that might have been part of it. That's a really good, interesting point. And maybe we can track to see like how he did with the 6-day stuff with Seattle versus
Pearson's throwing gas. Maybe they can work out a 6-man.
It could be. I mean, we've seen guys fluctuate in velocity a lot in season. I remember getting like excited about Chris Bubich for a moment because he threw 92 one start, then he threw 90 the next one. I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. But it's with Kikuchi, my stance is I think command is still a greater issue. That's half of it is the velocity, but he also needs to be able to command his stuff. And I will say the slider and cutter actually looked really good with location yesterday. But until he actually executes the proper Blake Snell blueprint, which is 4 seamers up and then secondary stuff down, I don't think I can buy into it. And even if I see it, I've been tricked before by Kikuchi doing it and then not holding on to it. And I'm going to be, if Kikuchi breaks out, I'm not going to be the one holding it because I'm not going to be the one that is going to take that shot when he starts doing it.
Exactly. And we were on a 100-meter dash to Nick's tips for people drafting late pitchers. I just stopped him at the 1-meter line at opportunity. So opportunity number 1.
Yeah. So let's say you have opportunity, right? Or you have a chance for it. Honestly, I think the most important thing that, there's 2 sides of the coin, right? There's one of your guys like Miles Michaelis and Dakota Hudson, where it's just, are they like decent enough? And like, can they get me innings? And like, are they just being fine so that I can look and see the schedule and be like, oh, cool, they get like a weak team early on. I'll take that chance, right? That's cool. I believe that Michaelis gets the Pirates to start. I'm like, I'm all right with that, maybe, with that amazing Cardinals defense. But more so, what I think is the fun of this is watching actual pitchers and what they do and if their stuff is good. So how do we define stuff? We talk about velocity. We want to see 95 up, right? We want to see that. But how are they using their secondary pitches? Are they throwing it with confidence? That is, they're throwing it for strikes early on when they're behind in counts. Are they going to a secondary pitch? And what are the results of that? Are they getting those secondary pitches as slider, changeup, curveball? Are they down in the zone constantly? Are they getting up? Even if they've got a whiff, it's not really great if it's in the upper third of the zone. Typically, you want to see that down and away from the batter, right? Things like that. And you see Reed Detmers is the first one that comes to mind right now for me, because there is a 6th spot open for the Angels. They've said they want to go 6-man. They have Shohei Ohtani in there. And it's between Jaime Barria and Reed Detmers. And if you remember Detmers from last year, you might have been like, oh, he was terrible. He came up and whatever. It wasn't great. Yeah, he was 22 years old. And he just got thrown into the majors, essentially. He had one really good start where he was throwing curveballs for strikes and then sliders for whiffs. And I watched this other start. He was cruising with his curveball. It looked beautiful, had nice sliders. This was a potential breakout. Like if he gets that 6th opportunity, then as we joke about with the Angels, they get hurt all the time. Then the security comes with Detmers if he's able to stay healthy with it. And suddenly you have someone that can just be constantly starting for you. Do I think that is going to happen? I don't know. I honestly believe that Barria, who has pitched before, started for the Angels before, is going to actually ultimately get that 6th spot, considering the young age of Detmers. Still, seeing those breakers and how effective they are is a huge, huge deal. And that's one of the major things that you should be focusing on now is, all right, this guy's showing up. Is this stuff actually anything good? The second I see someone with 89 miles per hour, I'm like, I'm done. I don't care what the rest of it is. They're not going to be so electric that they demand a spot or something like that. So Detmer's good example of that. Mitch Keller throwing upper 90s. Command is bad of the breakers. I'm not in on that.
Curious. This is not someone who's very late. He's going late enough. But Logan Gilbert, who is a guy that you're either in or out on, he's someone that looked like he could just stand to trust his off-speed stuff a little more, especially maybe his changeup, because it's so good if he can just kind of let it fly. Where are you him on this year? Because he's going at a part in the draft where there's plenty of a return on investment to be had if you're taking him where he's going.
So this is this is hard. This is difficult. There are times I need to trust my gut because we're talking about this before. Like, what ifs do you want to do, right? Is it the if of Jordan Montgomery? Is he going to figure out his fastballs, right? And I have Gilbert and Montgomery kind of in the same-ish tier. I think I have Gilbert in the one above. And that's because my gut says the if for Gilbert is going to work out. And that if is the slider actually becoming a consistent strike offering. It was a 55% strike rate last year, and that's his premier number two. I could say his primary secondary pitch. That can be a 65% strike rate pitch. I think he can take the leap with that. And if he does, Seattle's going to let Logan Gilbert pitch. I really don't think you're going to see the Mariners put the brakes on Gilbert this year. I think he's going to go every fifth day. I think he's going to be a 90 pitch per game guy. And with a really, really good fastball that got hit hard last year, because everything else sucked.
He didn't really elevate enough. He elevated, but like in the danger zone. He didn't go high enough.
He didn't go quite enough. Exactly, right. But still had a 12% swing strike rate on a 73% strike rate. And he had to do that because his slider wouldn't get strikes, his changeup wouldn't get strikes, his curveball wouldn't get strikes. And I mean this in a big way. 42% strike rate on a curveball? No. 44 on your changeup? Come on, man. We need some help here. So I'm leaning on Gilbert figuring this out. And we actually saw stretches last year when his slider was pristine.
Yes.
And Gilbert killed it. You know, he went against the Red Sox, struck out 9 batters with only 200 runs in 6 innings, right? Those days can be there. And I'm betting that with more time and more development in the majors, because prospect growth is not linear, Logan Gilbert is going to figure out that slider. So that's where I am on it. It's an if, though. And you got to figure out which ifs you're willing to buy into. It could very well not show up till June.
Not a guy you want on every team.
Right. Exactly.
I think four seam up, slider on the corners, increase the changeup. Man, he could be a beast. But there'll probably be a little growing pains in there. But I am in, but not entirely in. I drafted a lot of teams. He's on maybe like less than a quarter of them.
Right. Yeah, there's I know no one's really familiar with the high lock and the low lock stuff that I have. It's just really percentage of in the zone and stuff. It's easier for me than heat maps. There's YM lock, which is essentially vertical middle, right? So you have a high pitch, you have a low pitch, then you have the vertical middle. Yeah. That you don't want at all. You want like 0% if you can. And a third of his pitches were there, of his four-seamer, which that's where
Jazz Chisholm thinks all pitches are, but they're really tough.
Yeah, and that was 6 ticks above the league average on four-seamers at 28%. Just so, as exactly what you're saying, like you don't want that. And he had a hard percentage of 10%, which is so bad. I don't normally see 10%, double digits on hard percentage. So Logan Gilbert has to fix that.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so moving on, as I derailed you, we have opportunity. Number 2 was how do you use your secondary pitches?
Yeah, secondary stuff. Yeah,
secondary stuff. And what is there a third here?
I mean, the third is understanding repeatability, and that's a hard thing to grasp. It does go into overall command. You can actually just watch, and I mean command and not control. Like you can see guys that are around the zone, but you can get an understanding of, were they trying to do that? And is that where the ideal pitch is? You can also go into mechanically, and this goes into a little bit about my hesitation a little with Freddie Peralta, of being very closed stance. That is throwing cross body a lot.
Yeah, going so much can go wrong. Yeah, with Don Willis, it's a ridiculous amount of mechanics. With Peralta, it's too much ground to cover from point A to point B.
And it's when you're throwing super cross body, that is when you step towards home, you make it so that your hips are not angled toward the plate at all. It's actually just closer to third base if you're righty or first base if you're lefty. It can be really hard to get the timing right. Some guys have mastered that. Madison Bumgarner mastered that. Maybe Freddie Peralta has, but what we've seen over the years are like a 10% walk rate. And I call him Professor Chaos for this, right? Peralta was an exception last year. But if you are watching a guy in spring training, you've never seen him before, and there's just a lot going on, it will speak to inconsistency. And I often like to say a pitcher is either battling himself or the batter. And you subconsciously watching the game will know this. You will have anxiety about him or confidence about him, and acknowledge that, because watching Zach Wheeler allow 5 earned runs last year to the Yankees felt abnormal because you knew that he was battling the batter. He wasn't battling himself, and he was a much better pitcher than that moment. Or you see guys that are wasting half of their pitches in the dirt. They eventually struck him out, but you don't feel so good about it. You don't feel like he was dominant or so. It was a 3-2 slider that the guy just kind of swung through, and that was it. But you're like, man, like he threw all these bad pitches to get there. Yeah, that's him battling himself. And when you see a pitcher that is battling the batter with excellent stuff and has that opportunity, that's when we truly get excited.
And I think that's, I've seen different opinions where they take that cross body movement, and there's some people that are realistically looking at it as a problem and probably will be a long-term. It's just difficult, especially as pitchers are become less athletic.
Right.
But there's some people that look at it as, it makes his stuff all so
It does.
deceptive, which it does. It just, it's both sides.
Adam Ottavino is a perfect example. Watch any inning of Adam Ottavino, and it's full of stress. The ultimate results are generally good, but I mean, how many pass balls, wild pitches have you seen with like Adam Ottavino? Like one is amazing and one is bad, and that's the nature of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that brings up the kind of towards the end of the episode here. We went through a lot of random pitchers. We went through the things you should look at from, actually like doing the eye test, watching what the pitcher is trying to do. It's such a big thing. So many people play fantasy baseball nowadays. There's some people that talk to me. They're like, I don't even watch the games. I just like fantasy baseball. And that just hurts me right here.
Yeah, of course.
I love baseball, and I love watching it, but I love the number side too. So in the beginning, if you want to review, I went through plenty of things I think you should, you can look for as far as the metrics and things that, especially early in the season, you obviously want a sample size. Don't be looking at like the first start. Oh my God, look at his velocity and look at how much he used this. No, that doesn't change. Look at game logs from game to game. You'll be stunned at how much like a pitcher will change.
Yeah, look at the pitch mix tab we have. You can actually just see how much he uses stuff, the effectiveness of everything. It really helps getting a grasp of like the flow of not just the pitcher's performance, but their individual pitches, and it changes everything.
One thing that I think, at least in terms of the popular sites people are used to using, because you guys made massive upgrades, and I really suggest everyone goes to Pitcher List to check out what you've done. But unlike the Fangraphs and the Baseball Savant, if someone is into even Brooks Baseball, if you're like into breaking down pitching analysis, one thing that is really not quite easily accessible, at least to like more the casual person trying to break this down, is the plan versus righties and lefties. Like you can do basic splits, but it's harder and harder to just actually find and go into how a pitcher is attacking guys differently. Because I mentioned earlier, Patrick Sandoval was trying to find a way to get lefties out more. And sometimes you look at a pitch mix and now realize he throws one of those pitches like 0% of the time to one side of the plate. So I don't know if you have any like kind of advice or how you deal with that of breaking down pitchers, because it's such an important thing, especially nowadays when, righty and lefty and everything, it's pitchers are completely different from one side of the plate to the other. And sometimes a turnaround is hidden because you don't realize that the change may not come on a macro level. It's just this micro thing of just making sure they can get just a few extra lefties out.
Everybody listening, just know that Matt is a great host, because what he's letting me do is plug my own site right now. And what we do is on our repertoire, we have splits, and you're allowed to change it versus righty versus lefty, where all the numbers we have from approach to StatCast numbers, batted ball, their general overview of usage, all that stuff can be separated based on righty or lefty. And you can just jump through each pitch and just kind of see that. So you'll see like Zach Plesac, his extreme splits on his slider and his changeup, for example, and how he introduced the changeup the curveball to help against lefties. We also do it for our game log too. It does take a little bit longer to load because that is an absurd amount of data. But we do have those splits and individually on pitches too, if you want, inside of that giant game log. So I definitely suggest if you want to learn more about these guys, you can dive as deep as you want on that stuff. It can be very illuminating to understand, like, oh, he should throw this pitch more often or not. And I watched Jesus Luzardo yesterday. I realized, oh man, he throws his curveball against lefties and he doesn't do it enough against righties. And that should change. And I really hope he does. But it's stuff like that that might illuminate why this trend is happening or what kind of decisions they're making. And then maybe Luzardo does throw them more against righties and has more success. There's an opportunity for improvement.
And I did. I lobbed that up for you to tee out of the park. We did that. We opened the show with this and we'll end it with it. Context is everything. There's so much data out there. There's so much to learn about baseball nowadays. There's between the scouting aspects, the freaking lasers being shot all over the stadium with stats. It's a lot for especially newer people, but it makes you fall in love with baseball even more. Some people say analytics ruin baseball. It doesn't. It gives you a whole new appreciation. You don't have to learn all of it. You don't have to master all of it. You don't have to care about half of it, but dig into some of this stuff. Learning how a pitcher attacks left and right, you'll enjoy watching them more. You can guess what they're going to do. You can try to see what they have in mind. To watch some of Nick's videos, he breaks these down on YouTube, where he'll go through and try to go through what the pitcher should be doing. It's really fascinating stuff. So use all these things at your own disposal and try to find some good finds later in your draft. So you can, instead of just grabbing someone because they're next in ADP, but you don't completely want to take Cal Quantrill for some reason.
No,
take somebody else.
Don't take Cal Quantrill. I mean, maybe the first start.
I brought him up as a guy to avoid and pick someone else instead.
He's a sparp, though. He is a sparp. If you're in a points league that has innings focused, then you need to have two relievers, like Tout Wars maybe. He's a really good sparp, and I was really upset I didn't get him. That's all. It's the only scenario.
Do a lot of your own work. It's really fun. And if you have any questions, reach out. There's so many fun people in the fantasy baseball community.
Oh, yeah.
Nick's great. I have my DMs open all the time. Sometimes people are embarrassed for some reason. They don't want to ask a question.
Come on in.
There are no stupid questions. Bring them on. Half the people don't know what we're talking about. Me and Nick don't know half the stuff we're looking at with all the new stuff coming out. We just are you put it together in the best way that makes sense. And then you talk to others who are smarter than you, and you talk to other people who have experience in other areas. It's dive in. Like you said, come on in. We want to talk to you. So
the water's fine.
Yeah, the water's fine. Thank you for listening to the Turn 2 podcast. Spring training starting to ramp up. People are getting cut from teams. I mean, sorry for your loss, but the real stars are starting to really play every day because it's shortened spring training. So yeah, we're going to get to see everyone ramp up. Max Scherzer's already out there throwing almost complete games to start things off. And everyone else will get there a little closer. So Nick, we kind of been plugging your work kind of as we went along, but remind everyone, what you have going on over at Pitcher List. I know you've added, you kind of split things into fantasy and non-fantasy. You have a lot of cool things going over there. So let everyone know where they should go, where they should sign up, where they can find certain things. Hit them up with all the fun.
Yeah, what you guys should be doing is going to the Turn 2 podcast on Apple Podcasts and rate and review this. 5 stars, leave a wonderful review, all of that fun stuff, and enjoy the spring, enjoy the season. We'll have you all covered at Pitcher List, so come on by, introduce yourself. But yeah, I'm just excited to get going. We've been we didn't really know what we'd get, and sure, it's a week later, but I'm so stoked. I'm just ready to talk about all these pitchers the entire year.
All right, and definitely go over Pitcher List. Sign up to their community. So many great people over there. Like I said, they poke around with all the fun stuff over there. The league averages is so good. So thank you for listening to the Turn 2 podcast. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about spring training lineups with a lineup guru, Mike Curlin, as he's in there with his microscope trying to figure out why this guy batting first on a Tuesday is what is so important. And he's going to tell you why. And we're going to dig into it next week, everybody. So yeah, rate, review, 5 stars, the whole bit. I always forget to say it myself. Nick did it for me, but we'll be back next week. See everybody.